So is it possible to use the same exact strategy for 2 years straight and be back-to-back champions? Well, when it came to big money winners, last year's big winner actually had a different approach than 2023's winner. But 2022 and 2021's winner back-to-back used the exact same draft strategy. Really, the bottom line is it all depends on how the fantasy community reacts to a previous year of fantasy football. In last year's $1.5 million prize winner used the balanced draft strategy in 2024 fantasy football to win all that money. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how we could use the balanced draft strategy in 2025 fantasy football and if we should use it for your main leagues. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support if you get value from the video today, which I know you will. Because as I discussed, 2024 Fantasy Football's $1.5 million prize winner on Underdog used the balanced draft strategy. Now, you might be wondering, what is the balanced draft strategy? You've probably heard of the double hero running back strategy, the hero running back strategy, zero running back draft strategy. But the balanced draft strategy is kind of exactly how it sounds. A balanced draft strategy is going to make sure that you're hitting on all the important positions early, and then you're going to highlight quarterback and tight end kind of in the middle rounds to where you're not getting low-level production at those onesie positions at the quarterback and the tight end, but you want to make sure that you're maximizing your wide receivers and your running backs both in the early rounds. So you don't want to have an imbalanced team to where you're super running back heavy, so you've got tons of running back production, but your wide receivers aren't as productive. You don't want the opposite either. You don't want your wide receiver to be too productive while your running backs are lacking. You're really aiming for that balanced approach here to where your two running backs, your two wide receivers, and in Underdog's case, 3 wide receivers are going to be really, really good and consistent at performing and giving you the same amount of ceiling as all the other positions. Now, this draft strategy can also align in certain cases with the value-based draft strategy. And the value-based draft strategy essentially is going to be, if I'm on the clock at the 112, right, or the 110, I'm going to be looking for projections and based how much all those players that are available when I'm picking, whoever has the most amount of projected points coming into the fantasy season, that's who I'm going to make my pick based off of. So again, it's sort of aligned with a balanced draft strategy, but obviously we're not going to be trying to target a quarterback round 2 or a tight end in round 3 in this particular balanced draft strategy right here. So the big question is, why does it work? Well, the reason why the balanced draft strategy works is because you have to know the most important rule to this one, which is flexibility. Flexibility is key when you're talking about a fantasy football draft. You want to let the draft come to you as a fantasy football drafter right here. So I want to prove to you exactly what they did last year when they won $1.5 million using this strategy. It kind of shows that they let the draft come to them in a lot of different ways. So with their first 5 picks, and I'll get into the full draft here later in the video, but I wanted to highlight the first 5 picks on this guy's team. So the first 5 were Jamar Chase, a wide receiver in round 1 at the 104 spot. Then at the back of the second round, he grabbed his workhorse running back or his hero running back, whatever you want to put it like, if that makes you identify what this strategy could be in theory a little bit better. You go with a hero running back at the back of round 2. Then you grab another wide receiver round 3, and in round 4 is what this guy did. Devonta Smith in round 3, T. Higgins at the back of round 4, and then he went with Isaiah Pacheco in round 5. So essentially what you could see here is you have to remember this as well, that Underdog is a 3 wide receiver format. 1 flex, 3 wide receivers. So with wide receivers, you traditionally need to get this position earlier on in your draft because Underdog, these wide receivers are flying off the board like crazy because their value is so high given that it's a 3 wide receiver format, meaning that every single week, you will have 3 wide receivers at the very least scoring for you, potentially 4 with that additional flex spot. So he got his 3 wide receivers before round 4, and then he got his anchor running back in round 2, hero running back, whatever you want to call it, and then he grabbed his RB2 in round 5. Very, very balanced draft strategy right there. So in my opinion, here was the genius of why it worked in 2024 for this particular guy, LGREWE50. So if we wanted to use the balanced draft strategy, in theory, Again, we got to remember the number one rule here, which is flexibility when the draft is actually playing out in front of your eyes. So to make sure that we're all on the same page here, let's just go through last year's underdog ADP, which is, again, where he drafted and won $1.5 million. So let's look at the ADP in the first 5 rounds. And particularly what I want to find here is how many wide receivers are going in each round, how many running backs are going in each round. So last year on underdog, there was 8 wide receivers that went in round 1 compared to 4 running backs who went in the first round. So theoretically here, 8 wide receivers, that limits the possibility that all those guys can be top 5 options. It's not possible, right? Whereas running backs, all 4 of those guys theoretically could be top 5 options at the running back position. So in theory, let's say that he wanted to go ahead and pick a Christian McCaffrey at the 101 if he had it. That would have not worked last year, but the theory would actually work if you're trying to go with a balanced draft strategy right here. Now, in the second round, 9 wide receivers went and 3 running backs went. So if you're keeping track, that's 7 running backs off the board in the second round and 17 wide receivers off the board in the second round. So your chances of getting a really good wide receiver past round 2 last year in ADP was actually pretty slim because of the rate that wide receivers were going at. In round 3, 7 wide receivers went, 4 running backs went, and we had our first quarterback off the board. So the first onesie positional player came off the board in the third round. But still, we're maintaining a good spread of wide receivers and running backs through the first 3 rounds. 6 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, 1 running back, and 2 quarterbacks went off the board in the 4th round. So that's where things start to get a little bit quirky here, right? You're still going to have your wide receivers as the main meat of the meal, so to speak, right? In every round of a fantasy draft, wide receivers are typically going to go more often than any other positional group. But then you start to mix in tight ends and quarterbacks. You'll see that running back number shrink rather than the wide receiver number right here. And then in round 5, 1 quarterback, 5 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 4 running backs went in the 5th round. So if you're keeping track of all of that stuff, wide receivers are going at a much faster clip than running backs were in 2024, which is, again, typically going to be the case in a 3 wide receiver style draft. But in your regular redraft league, that's actually probably flipped a little bit. May not be as heavy towards the running back position if you flipped it for your home league, but it's going to be probably in all likelihood a couple running backs more than wide receivers taken inside the first 5 rounds of a home redraft league, for example. But the 2 biggest takeaways that I want all of us to take away from with this particular number right here and what we've discussed with ADP on Underdog from 2024 is, number 1, he let the draft come to him. As I said, I believe that he let the draft come to him because if you look at Isaiah Pacheco in particular, he got him in the 5th round. Now, what you'll see is that over the offseason, last year, Isaiah Pacheco actually rose up to the 3rd round of underdog drafts. So it's not that I'm saying that Isaiah Pacheco was a, major slide in this guy's draft. I don't particularly know when this guy drafted. So he would have to tell you the answer of when he drafted and what Pacheco's price point was at that particular time. But Isaiah Pacheco was not that same value at this time of the year last year as he was in probably May or maybe early June. So essentially what he did was he acted and did his draft based on the community as a whole, what their reaction was to 2023 fantasy football. He reacted and drafted his team in 2024 based on what the community did in 2023. Now, the number 2 thing that I want you to take away here is that he chose a draft strategy, actually, that has a lot of historical success in an underdog best ball format. So what you can see here on the screen right now, it's a tool on RotoViz. It's actually really handy. I use it a lot in my drafts. So essentially what you could do here, and what I did for this video, is I plugged in exactly what he went round by round for the first 5 rounds from a positional basis in the draft. So he went wide receiver 1 in round 1, running back 1 in round 2, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in rounds 3 and 4, and running back 2 in round 5. Now, what you can see at the bottom here is the advance rates on those particular numbers. Now, to get to the playoffs in a best ball tournament on Underdog, that's 2 out of the top 12 teams. The top 2 teams out of 12 are advancing. So you have about a 16% chance of advancement before you even draft. So your chance of advancing to the playoffs when you use this strategy is 20.1%. That's a good increase from where you started at here. Now, to make it to the semis, that's an even smaller chance because you have one team out of 13 or 16 teams that go to the semifinals after the first round of Underdog playoffs. 1.29% chance of making it to the semis. Again, pretty strong number right there. And then to make it to the finals, really strong number, 0.15%. So I don't know if this guy particularly was targeting this draft strategy because he had seen past success with it, or if he just fell into it by luck. You'd have to ask him yourself. But the bottom line is he did use a strategy here that has historical success with not only best ball tournaments, but it also has a lot of success in your home redraft leagues as well. To go with a balanced draft strategy in fantasy football is usually going to add up to success. It usually will to some level of extent. Now, let's go ahead and look at what this team exactly was looking like in 2024. The winning team as a whole, you could see on the screen right now. So obviously we went through the first 5 rounds. Let's go through the remaining, 6 through 18 rounds. George Kittle in the second round. So what he did here was he ended up grabbing a tight end early-ish to middle rounds. Again, highlighting the importance that he emphasized with going with a balanced draft strategy. Because he figured to himself, I've got 3 wide receivers who are going to be starting for me. He feels really good about those 3 wide receivers. So I want to make sure that I go ahead and capitalize at the tight end position to where I could get one of the top tier tight ends in fantasy football because I've got comfortability at wide receiver and running back in this Underdog team. Again, really genius strategy right there. Brian Thomas Jr., a very high upside wide receiver in the 7th round, that ended up paying really big dividends, particularly in those last 3 weeks of the fantasy football playoffs. So that was another big score right there. So what you could see, if you kind of put it in theory here, he went with a onesie position in the 6th round. Whether it's quarterback, whether it's tight end, obviously it worked out for him, being that it was George Kittle that he picked. But in 2025, in theory, if you wanted to go with a quarterback in round 6 instead of a tight end, then that might end up working as well. Because your bottom line is you're trying to balance your team by going with a onesie position, which you did not take inside the first 5 rounds. And then you went ahead in the 7th round and grabbed a really high upside positional player at the wide receiver or running back position. Again, it worked out really big for him, being that it was Brian Thomas Jr. But Brian Thomas Jr. was just a byproduct of probably what was going through this guy's head at the time, which is I want to take a shot on a big upside player in the 7th round. Then you go to round 8. He gets his Joe Burrow to stack with Jamar Chase and to stack with T. Higgins. Now, obviously, for the majority of the season, it worked out great for Jamar Chase. But what ended up happening here was that T. Higgins and Burrow both went off in that Week 17 matchup right here, giving him the major edge with that stack upside. So not only is he going, again, with a mid-round quarterback to balance out his team, rather than going with a 12th or 13th round quarterback with not as much upside, he not only did that, but he also went ahead and grabbed a stack, because that is also important as well, to stack your top wide receiver with a good quarterback. James Conner, round 9. Again, good upside at the running back position. Starter that you're getting in round 9 is what he ended up doing. And then he ended up taking Brock Purdy in round 10. So Brock Purdy, again, gave him that positional stability at the quarterback position. And given the fact that he had taken an injured Joe Burrow at the time of his draft, he probably didn't feel as comfortable with having Joe Burrow be his only quarterback until like the 15th or 16th round, taking another one. So he went ahead and tied off his quarterback position by round 10. Then he went with Chase Brown. Again, another high upside running back pick that he grabbed in the later rounds. So you're starting to see a trend here, especially when you add on Ricky Pearsall in round 12. Ty Chandler round 13, even though it didn't work out, had upside at the time because the price was so low on him. Jermaine Burton, again, a potential stack player that didn't work, but it had the upside with it. Adam Thielen, a perceived wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 going in the 15th round, you got to take that. Noah Fant at your tight end position, don't really know what the point was there, even though he did okay, I guess, in certain weeks. And then Jawan Johnson. So what you could see here is that what this guy did was, after making sure that he had all of his positions balanced out to a point where he felt comfortable, being that there was a certain amount of upside that was really even from each position. Each position had the exact same amount of upside. Then he started taking big shots at the back of the middle-ish rounds to the later rounds in his fantasy football draft, and it paid dividends, as you could see. So after going through what he did in 2024, should we run this back in 2025? Like, is it going to work again in 2025? Yes and no. That's the answer that I have for this one right here. So why yes, right? Why will it work in 2025 to a certain extent? Because like I said earlier, a balanced draft strategy is always a great play to make in a fantasy football draft. If you actually hit on all those guys and do it in a balanced fashion to where you get every position, at least one of them, by round 7 or 8, then you're going to be in really good position here, because there won't be a major teardrop as far as upside at each given position. It also allows massive flexibility to let the draft play out before your eyes, like I said. You do not want to be too rigid in fantasy football drafts. Now, here's the reason it won't work. Because if you try to follow this to a T, it will not work in all likelihood. Because again, you cannot be too rigid when you're going into a fantasy football draft. You want to let it come to you, but it's fine to keep an idea of this draft strategy right here. Because let's remember something really quick. Remember what we just went through a couple minutes ago about how many wide receivers and running backs were going round by round in 2024? Well, let's look at ADPs this year and see what's changed from 2024 to 2025 as far as how fast and how many wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends were going in the first 5 rounds. So the first round this year of underdog ADP, there's 7 wide receivers and 5 wide receivers going in the first round. So that's more balanced than it was last year. There was 8 wide receivers last year, 7 wide receivers this year. So that's a little bit more balance that we're getting in that first round of underdog ADP this year. 6 wide receivers, 5 running backs, and a tight end are actually going in the second round of drafts this year. So again, we're seeing a lot more balance here at the wide receiver position, because if you recall, after round 2 in 2024, that was 17 wide receivers off the board. This year, it's 13 wide receivers off the board. So just keep that in mind, because I'm going to go into it here more in a second. Then in the third round, 1 tight end, 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, and 5 wide receivers going in the third round. So again, what we're seeing here this year is still the same thing as last year, where it starts to get a little bit quirky when you add in those other positional values in the third round. In the fourth round, 2 quarterbacks, 1 tight end, 2 running backs, and 7 wide receivers are going in the fourth round. And then in the fifth round to end it off, 1 quarterback, 4 running backs, 7 wide receivers going inside the fifth round. So what you could see here, and again, keep in mind the history from last year. 24 wide receivers were gone by the end of round 3 in 2024. Compare that to 2025. 18 wide receivers are gone by the end of round 3 in 2025. Now, you might be asking me, Ryan, why did you get to go over that? It feels kind of pointless here. Because there's 2 major takeaways that I want us to take away from that. Number 1 is if you look at how this dude drafted last year, he went with Jamar Chase in the first round and a running back 1 in round 2. Now, again, I don't know if that was his strategy all along or he just let the draft come to him. I kind of think he just let the draft come to him. But going with a running back 1 this year isn't a terrible idea, particularly at the back of your draft. Because what you can do is you can turn around in that second round at the front of the second round and still grab a top tier wide receiver, since there's less wide receivers going off the board earlier in 2025 than there was in 2024. You also might be able to get away with a 3rd wide receiver by the end of round 5. And if you recall, this guy's draft, he had 3 wide receivers by the end of round 4. I think this year you could actually put it off a round and get 3 wide receivers by the end of round 5, because there's less wide receivers going off the board by round 5 than there was last year. So to kind of put some things into action here, I wanted to look at a couple of my balanced approach drafts that I've done in Underdog so far. Now, keep in mind, I've done over 130 drafts on Underdog so far, and I'm going to continue to do more. So I went through and try to get different positions of the draft where I use this strategy. So I was at the 112 here. What you could see is I got Ashton Genty in the first round at the back, and then I got Amon-Ra St. Brown at that second round turn right here. So again, you could have easily, like at the 12th pick, you could go with the wide receiver round 1. I could have swapped those 2 picks out. It wouldn't have really mattered particularly. But the bottom line here is that I'm trying to get an RB that I know has top 5 upside in that first 2 picks. And I don't think I would have been able to get one had I waited until round 3. So then I get a wide receiver who I'm very comfortable being a top 6 wide receiver in fantasy football. Then in round 3, I went with Jaden Daniels here. Now, in a perfect world, like to show you guys a better strategy, it wouldn't have been Jaden. But the reason I'm still ending up showing you guys this particular draft was because by round 5, I still had my 3 wide receivers. Mike Evans in round 4, Deebo Samuel in round 5. And on that 5-6 turn right there, I got Travion Henderson. So again, you could basically call Travion a 5th round pick if you really wanted to. So end of story, by round 6, I had 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and a quarterback here. So that's exactly the same type of strategy that he used last year, just a little bit different as far as the draft positions that I went ahead and took a guy, right? Because I took my quarterback in round 3, and last year the winner took his tight end in round 6. But in round 6 this year, since I had the 601, I grabbed a running back at the top of the 6th round because it basically made him a top 5 pick for me. So to me, this is going to be a strategy that I'm going to keep an eye on how this team does this year. Because then I went ahead and took some shots on some big upside guys in the later rounds. I got Emeka Egbuka in round 7, who I believe has tons of upside as a rookie wide receiver. Jaylen Warren, who fit my unsuspecting league-winning running backs criteria, which if you have not seen, it's worth your time. Trust me. It led me to Chuba last year, and it led me to Chase Brown last year. That's how you find unsuspecting league winners at great values. Then in round 9, I grabbed Baker Mayfield to round out the quarterback position here. And then I grabbed Evan Ingram in the 10th round to, again, give myself a good balanced approach here with this particular team. So I'm actually really looking forward to seeing how this draft plays out. But again, this is just the purpose of this right now, is to show you guys a balanced draft strategy that I put into action this year. Now let's look at the 110 spot. I have the 110 right here, and right now I grabbed Amon-Ra St. Brown and Drake London. Now this is a particular draft where I actually remember doing this vividly. I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to take the chance on if a guy like Kyren Williams can fall to me at the 3rd round spot, or maybe even a Josh Jacobs. Now, Josh Jacobs did not fall to me, but I got Kyren Williams, who has top 5 upside at the running back position at the back of the 3rd round. So if you're keeping track, very safe wide receiver 1 with Amon-Ra, and Drake London, who many people would say similar type of vein that you're getting with Amon-Ra. 2 potentially top 5, top 10 wide receivers. Then you go with a running back who has top 5 upside in the 3rd. Then I grabbed Breece Hall in the 4th to give myself a solid running back 2. And then I grabbed Deebo Samuel as my wide receiver 3, a big upside player at the 5th round. So again, very balanced approach right here. Very similar to what our friend did when he won $1.5 million. Travion Henderson at the running back position in round 6. So this is a scenario where I have 3 running backs and 3 wide receivers at the beginning of the first 6 rounds. So then you go to round 7 here, and that's where I got my quarterback, Baker Mayfield, because I stacked him with Emeka Egbuka a round later. Then I grabbed Evan Ingram in the 9th, again, a very solid tight end who's going to give me a lot of positional stability that is not going to make me feel like I have an imbalanced team going into the year. And then a high upside running back with Travis Etienne in the 10th round. The bottom line is here, you're trying to get a lot of elite upside picks with those final couple rounds of your fantasy football draft. Now, the last one I wanted to take you through was from the 106. I actually really like this one as well, because I applied exactly what I was kind of talking about. So I went with Jahmyr Gibbs at the 106 spot. Again, I feel comfortable taking a hero running back in 2025, probably like I've never been able to feel comfortable before in an underdog best ball draft. Then I grabbed Ladd McConkey in the second round and Rashee Rice in the third. Now, this was actually way before the Rashee Rice suspension, so maybe I could get him at the fourth round if I did this particular style again. I don't know, but Rashee Rice, I think this draft was in like May. So Rashee Rice's price hadn't spiked up to the second round that far. So then you go with Travis Hunter in the third round. Again, you can argue with me on the players that I picked for my 3 wide receivers, but I got 3 upside wide receivers within the first 4 picks. And then I got my RB2 in round 5 with Kenneth Walker. So I've got 2 high upside running backs, 3 high upside wide receivers to give me a lot of balance here within my first 5 picks. Deebo Samuel as my wide receiver 4 feels really good. Then I grab Patrick Mahomes in the 7th round to stack him with Rashee Rice here. So again, balance at the quarterback position to start giving us a lot of balance at a onesie position to make my overall team more balanced. Then I grab Brian Robinson Jr. as my running back 3. I think stability is important there at that RB3 spot. Travis Kelce, I don't usually draft him, but I did draft him just because of the super stack potential here with Patrick Mahomes. And again, grab my tight end at round 9 in the middle to make myself not feel as imbalanced as I could have been if I waited to get a tight end by round 12, round 13, for example, right? Then I got another quarterback with Justin Herbert in round 10. So again, the point here is to reiterate that this is a draft strategy that always works, regardless of whether it's a home league that you're doing, a redraft league on ESPN, on Yahoo, or if you're in a best ball league. This is how the dude won $1.5 million last year. It's a $2 million prize this year on Underdog. So we can glean a lot from what the winner did last year and apply it to what we do in 2025, because I do believe that based on ADPs this year, this will have some success. Now, again, you do not want to use this as a Bible. You do not want to go pick by pick and try to exactly replicate the picks that he was making on a round-by-round basis, not just with players, but I'm talking about positional groups round by round. That's not going to work in all likelihood. But the bottom line is you give yourself a shot. And if you do want to give yourself a shot at $2 million this year and use a good draft strategy that has been historically effective, go down in the comments. There's a link there to Underdog, and you can use code FFN to sign up for Underdog. They will match your first deposit 50%, up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you get into one of these tournaments here. And again, Best Ball Mania is the one that offers the big $2 million prize pool. Now, last year, I actually won $19,000 on Underdog, which I'm going to do a full breakdown about how much I spent and the tournaments I did well in and how much I won exactly in a couple weeks. But last year I did win $19,000 in Underdog Best Ball tournaments because I was taking the shot on a lot of types of guys like this and trying to utilize a bunch of different draft strategies. But obviously this strategy right here is going to be worth your while. So let me know what you think of the video. Let me know what you think of this draft strategy right here as well. And like I said, I do believe that this draft strategy right here would work for both best ball and home redraft leagues. But if you do want to see a video that's more tailored to home redraft leagues, that is going to be a great draft strategy to do in those types of leagues, click on this video right here.